What you are about to experience is out of this world. Politics, history, and of course, a lot of entertainment. It's time to rock it with the Docket. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. We are here with another fantastic episode of the Dockery Docket. I'm excited to be here, and I hope that you are excited to be here as well. And if you are excited to be here as well, make sure to go down below, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, so then you never miss one of my videos. Now, I will be honest with you. I wasn't planning on doing a debate review for the Tim Walz versus JD Vance debate. There is so much going on in our world right now. We have hurricanes that are destroying states, which I will probably talk about in the next episode, so make sure you stay tuned. We have people trying to kill Donald Trump, and we have an election that is fast approaching. Another reason that I thought about skipping this debate review was because for the first time in the history of doing debate reviews, this one was actually boring. There were no earth-shattering moments like the "you'd be in jail" or "you are no Jack Kennedy." It was a smooth debate with no fighting between the two candidates, which in our day and age is very rare. And of course they disagreed on things, but they also agreed on different things as well. I know, I was shocked too. JD Vance would say something like, "I think Tim Walz and I would actually both agree that murder is bad," and they would actually agree on something. If it was Trump and Kamala Harris, I don't even think they would have agreed that murder was wrong. This debate was a debate like none other, and honestly, it was a breath of fresh air. And I'll be honest with you, I love Trump. I want him to be the president, but the man doesn't debate very well. He either has a really good night, like the one with Joe Biden or the town hall with Hillary Clinton, or he goes in too hard and it ends up hurting him. Like the debate with Joe Biden in 2020 with Chris Wallace as the moderator, and maybe the Kamala Harris debate this year. He was more reserved, but he still didn't really help himself. JD Vance was the opposite of this. And if we are being honest with ourselves, after this debate, I wish that JD Vance was on top of the Republican ticket. Yes, it was that good. He was clear, precise, and he answered all of the questions in detail. He was respectful to the moderators, addressing them by name and not calling them stupid or dumb. This respect was amplified when JD Vance and the moderators started to go after each other. As before this debate started, each candidate agreed to different rules, and one of those rules was that the moderators would not fact check. Instead, each candidate was responsible for fact checking each other. So when a question about Springfield, Ohio and the immigrants that are there came up, JD Vance explained in great detail that there are people there and it is overwhelming hospitals and schools. Houses aren't affordable, and he was focused on the people of Springfield, Ohio, and not the migrants that are living there. And well, the moderator decided to jump in and give a fact check, and well, chaos ensued. Take a look at this.
For our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to.
Now, you can see in this moment that JD Vance is annoyed, but he is talking back respectfully. He is being strong and saying, "Hey, you are breaking the rules. Let me fact check you." Now, what bothers me most about this whole exchange was not the mics being cut off, but just how smug the moderator was when she was saying, "Thank you for describing the legal process." Then even Tim Walz jumped in, and it led to both of their mics being cut off. Now, when the mics came back on, JD Vance could have gone absolutely crazy. And he could have started complaining, saying, well, this debate is just terrible. This is 3-on-1. This isn't fair, and you broke the rules. But instead, he just kept on going like nothing ever happened, and continued to remain calm and respectful to the moderators. It seems like with any debate that we have seen in the past 8 years, the moderators have always attacked Republicans. JD Vance expected this, and he didn't get flustered, and he stayed on course. And I am glad that JD Vance responded back to this fact check, talking about how these different people get asylum and how the process has been abused by the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris White House. Along with that, you see moderators do this all the time. Republicans will say something, the moderators will say, well, actually, that's wrong. Democrats speak. And the Republicans never get to respond to that fact check. That gets annoying, so calling them out and responding with facts was a great move in this debate. And I will also point out that Tim Walz said in this debate that illegal border crossings were down compared to when Donald Trump left office, which isn't true at all, but the moderators didn't seem to want to fact check Tim Walz. Or after he ended his response, they add a response of their own. However, Tim Walz did kind of have a rough time with the moderators, but first we have to talk about Tim Walz's debate performance, because let me tell you, it wasn't the best. Now, I think he did better than Joe Biden in the 2024 debate. I think anyone would, but I honestly think it was close, as right out of the gate, the guy was stumbling and tripping over his own words. Now, this makes sense because you're debating in front of thousands of people. Maybe he would have been more prepared for this debate if he got some questions from the media. In my honest opinion, Tim Walz just looked unprepared and nervous the whole time. And just like Joe Biden, he was a gaffe machine. This was bad for him and also for Kamala Harris. During Tim Walz's time as the vice presidential nominee, we have seen him make some mistakes on the campaign trail, like claiming that we need to ban guns that he used in war, but then realized that he wasn't actually in war. Then, to defend himself, he claimed that he just had bad grammar. Well, in this debate, the media actually asked him a hard question about him claiming that he was in Tiananmen Square when the freedom protesters broke out in China. Now, I'm not sure why this question was asked, but it made Tim Walz stumble, and he was caught in a lie and couldn't get himself out of it. Take a look at this.
We were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that.
First of all, he answered the question like a politician. I grew up in a small town, blah, 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 blah. Then he talks about how he used to ride his bikes at night, and he is proud of that service, which doesn't really make any sense at all. Then later on, he claims that he is a knucklehead at times, which I will be honest with you, that is exactly what I want one heartbeat away from the president. A big old goofball who makes confusing statements, but calls JD Vance weird. That, however, was only the first part of the response. The moderators actually asked him a tough follow-up question, and Tim Walz stumbled hard. Take a look at this.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
That was rough. And I believe one of the worst debate moments I have seen since the Joe Biden debate. And listen, JD Vance didn't have it easy either. He was asked tough questions. Like how back in the day, JD Vance didn't like Donald Trump very much and he said some bad things about Donald Trump. And the moderators asked him why that changed. And JD was able to answer and not miss a beat. Take a look at this.
In 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, "Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism." You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record.
Tim Walz continued his gaffe machine moments when talking about school shooters and if he supported an assault weapons ban, and he said this.
It's an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice.
He is now friends with school shooters? Of course this was a mistake, but what was he trying to say? That he was friends with school shooting victims? That he was friends with people that were involved with school shootings? Now, I thought about this moment in this debate for a long time, and I wondered what would have happened if Donald Trump said something like this? What would have happened if J.D. Vance said this at this debate? You know that people would instantly call for Donald Trump to drop out of the presidential race. Or they would force Donald Trump to pick a new VP candidate. But because it is good old Tim Walz, this gets brushed under the rug and is never talked about again. Now, the memes are funny, but it just shows how biased the media are, because that was a huge mistake. Along with that, just like Kamala Harris, Tim Walz decided to lie when it came to the abortion issue. And the question was about Tim Walz's abortion bill, which made barely no restrictions to abortion even up to the 9th month. And then J.D. Vance started to attack Tim Walz about the bill, as it offered no help for babies that were born alive after a failed abortion. Here is J.D. Vance talking about that, and Tim Walz shaking his head no.
And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business.
Now, I know that Democrats will believe that this was Tim Walz's strongest moment on this response, as he started talking about how this abortion issue should be up to the women. All that he said was that the law wasn't written that way, and he didn't even really explain what the law actually was. Well, he probably doesn't want to talk about that law because, well, JD Vance was right. I talked about this law after the DNC, but I will talk about it again. Tim Walz rushed an abortion law through the Minnesota Senate, and it was done so fast that the legislation left Minnesota with essentially no restrictions on abortion at any stage of pregnancy. And then he went further, making sure that doctors didn't have to report if a baby survived an abortion. As in 2012, under Minnesota law, the state was required to report whether abortions resulted in the life of the baby, what actions were taken to preserve the life of that baby, and whether the baby survived. Tim Walz repealed this measure in May of 2023, stripping the requirement that measures be taken to preserve the baby's life and health to merely replacing it with the requirements of care, meaning that if a baby is born alive after an abortion, they are kept comfortable and will probably die. And yes, that is barbaric. But Tim Walz just lies and makes platitudes about how this is all about a woman's right to choose, and he doesn't answer the question about the law. But the media just ate it up and claimed that this was the strongest moment ever of Tim Walz. And it wasn't. Honestly, in this debate, I don't think Tim Walz had a strong moment, and I don't think that JD Vance had a weak moment, but the media had different plans, as they had to paint JD Vance as a terrible and scary guy. Imagine, if you will, spending months claiming that JD Vance is weird and creepy, but then he gets on stage and he actually sounds good and confident. You have to try and spin it in some way. We will start with Politico, who went off talking about JD Vance's beard, as Politico had a body language expert who explained that research indicates that voters see beards as more masculine. That can be positive for some, reading as strength and competence, but to others, especially women, it can be negative, conveying aggression and opposition to feminist ideas. It's interesting. You know, when conservative men have beards, it's bad. But when liberal women and drag queens have beards, it is seen as something that is fantastic and strong and brave, which is very weird. The media also defended Tim Walz's crazy behavior, as the split screen of Tim Walz and JD Vance didn't help Tim Walz very much. As while JD Vance was looking like Jim from The Office, Tim Walz had these huge eyes, which was kinda creepy, but not to the media. As Politico wrote, when Walz felt especially passionate about something, he'd open his eyes wide as saucers. The article continues by saying, eye-popping can sometimes be a sign of surprise, but for Walz, it simply revealed his emotional intensity. And then they explained that it was a dynamic and emphatic facial motion that grabbed the viewer's attention. Early humans would have made such facial gestures to communicate strong emotions, like danger is close. For Walz, it gave extra weight to his feelings and held our gaze. Isn't it nice to know that Politico is comparing Tim Walz to early humans? I would be offended by that. And why can't the media just admit that Tim Walz looks scary and that he didn't do good in this debate? Well, because it would hurt Kamala Harris. The truth is, this debate probably won't change anyone's mind, and thankfully, this was the very last debate review of the season. And if the media keeps on acting the way that they do, it may be the very last debate review ever. I am so sick and tired of these different debates. I am tired of the arguing. I am tired of the moderators. I am tired of figuring out what is fact and what is fiction. The constant lying. The defending of the Republican because the media won't do it. It is time to change the format of these different debates. I am talking about maybe having a conservative perspective with a more liberal perspective. Get Sean Hannity out there, get Rachel Maddow out there, and have them both ask the candidates questions. And maybe then we can actually get some real answers from these candidates. Yes, of course there would be bias, but it would be on both sides. It wouldn't be just one-sided. Until then, we might never see another debate, or sadly, another debate review. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Dockery Docket. And until next time, like my mom always says, be good, be kind, be loving, goodbye.